Hi everybody, this is Aaron from My Relationship Resources, and today I have with me a wonderful woman named Pamela. Hi Pamela.
Hi Aaron.
Thanks for
Lovely
joining
to
us.
be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I have just had a treatment with Pam, and the treatment is called Logosynthesis, right? Can you give us a little bit of a background on Logosynthesis?
So Logosynthesis was developed by a guy called Willem Lammers, who's Dutch but based in Switzerland, and he discovered this about 15 years ago. And it's based on words, it's guided change using words to move energy, in a nutshell.
That is what I just experienced. It was really amazing because there was definitely a shift. And what I really found interesting about it was that we had this certain situation with a friend of mine that kind of caused a bit of a reaction in me. So we delved into that particular topic, but actually it took me back to when I was 7 years old to an event that happened with my brother, which that triggered quite an intense arousal inside me. From 1 to 10, we were using 0 as a not at all, and 10 as extreme. So it was a 7, wasn't it? And after we looked at the treatment and we used the words, the sentences that you use to kind of remove and clean the energy, or the event, you could also call it, but it's energy because it's old stuff that's just caught inside me. And then which led me to another event, which was with my mother, which also was totally, unaware for me. Then we did the clearing and we really worked through that, and it was very quick. I was so surprised how quickly it happened, but it just really went down to a 0 almost immediately. So, and I feel very clear. I feel very, centered. Even though I didn't come here today feeling uncentered, but I feel even more centered than what I was before. So, totally amazing. Very, very interesting. How did you get into logosynthesis, Pam?
Good question. I know the founder from years ago, and I'm a big believer in synchronicity. And so when I was looking for a new form of training, because I've done different lots of training in terms of self-development, I came across logosynthesis like 3 times in the same week. And I thought, well, that's an indicator for me to pursue something. Right? And so I think because I've done several types of training in say coaching and nonviolent communication, etc., it is the one method, for want of a better word, which I keep coming back to because there's so many layers to it and it keeps evolving, and it's like the work never stops, but it's so solid.
And you come from a corporate background, right? You come from a corporate coaching background, working with executives, in a very kind of structured, you could say, left brain kind of environment. So it's very interesting that you've moved into what we could call, I don't want to call it spiritual, but maybe a little bit more energetical sense, isn't it? The logosynthesis.
It's a very fine line between logosynthesis, in using logosynthesis between coaching and therapy. So it's actually being used across the board by coaches, by therapists, by psychiatrists, because logosynthesis looks at everything as energy. Whether energy is bound or whether it's in flow. So any disease is actually just a form of energy being stuck.
Definitely. Okay. And I mean, this is the experience that I just had in the treatment that we just did together. Was it was an energetical shift. So it was, as I said, I came in feeling pretty clear. Excited about having our talk today, but now I feel really clear. I really feel this sense of openness and clean. Somehow I would describe the feeling as clean.
A lot of people say that the reaction is because you can work with memories and beliefs and patterns and all of that, where things feel like there's an emotional charge, or you can even have a physical reaction to it. A lot of people then say at the end of the session is they feel it's like the memory's still there, but there's a sense of neutrality, of detachment.
That's the word. It's neutral. I really feel neutral. Like very good. So, in respect to relationships, because I mean, this is why the people are here. They want to work on their relationships. What's the the three benefits that you could say, you know, logosynthesis has on our relationships.
I know for myself, because, and that's one reason I have kept with logosynthesis, is because there's so many layers in our lives, and in terms of the history, it has. Oops.
There's a dog out there wanting to come back inside. Very unhappy dog.
I've got to open the door.
Yeah.
Sorry. I started logosynthesis actually for myself, so I can really talk about the experience I've had, and in relationships especially, because I used to be somebody who would be very reactive to the behaviour of my former partner. What I have, there's so many benefits, but I think the first words that come to mind are inner peace. It's amazing how much stronger I feel and know how to come back. I always get reacting or reactive to things still, but never as much as before. But I now have something that helps to come back to a place of centeredness, so inner peace. The other thing is being able to set boundaries. Because I think, especially in relationships, it's so important to be able to set boundaries.
Yeah.
But
be assertive to those.
Exactly, without fearing loss of someone, especially for someone who used to be very needy, like myself, constantly looking for affirmation, confirmation, appreciation from others and the outside world, which I no longer do, because it's now from the inside. Which, so there's inner peace, boundaries. And love. I don't like to use the word self-love so much, but it's just knowing that love is inside here. I don't need to go looking elsewhere for it. And then it's helped me become a better partner in my new relationship, because I no longer seek
that confirmation.
To complete me.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I've just had the treatment, so I'm sort of still
I'm
a bit spaced out. I'm still digesting it, but I can really see, you know, when there is sort of conflict and clashes happening between people and being reactive. And we talk about in the 5 key behaviours course, we talk about receptors. You know, receptors. You can't be triggered by something outside of yourself unless you have the receptor within you. You know, and those receptors are only activated from things that have happened to us in the past, or if you want to go a little bit further, maybe something that we've carried through our genes, from our grandparents or our great-grandparents, or anything along those lines. But, you know, and I think logosynthesis can really help us to identify those receptors, where they maybe came from, because quite often we forget.
Yeah, I think that's what you just said is pretty key, because a lot of our behaviour these days, and where we struggle these days, and the behaviours of the other person who really gets under our skin is actually not about the other person. It's about how if something in us is reacting, well, like you say, we've got the receptors to it, and it comes from usually a past experience, which we can't sometimes even identify, because it often happens also when we're at an age where we're not even conscious of it. And by the questioning techniques, which also come with logosynthesis, you know, you have these flash, you know, like you did before, like you would never connect it, one incident to the other, but it just comes up. And then you work with these old memories, which are still there, but you no longer react to them anymore. They're just neutralised afterwards. And so I think that's been the journey I've been on. There's more things that show up, but because you're able to neutralise them, you also react less to whatever happens around you, and that's so beautiful when you no longer, you know, fight reality or fight the other person.
Yeah, and quite often, I mean, it's just a kind of a cause and effect situation, isn't it? When you find that sort of clarity and that peace within you, your partner then starts to mirror that in some way, shape or form, maybe not straight away. It certainly takes time for their energy to shift, but as soon as your energy shifts, the dynamic, it's like a ripple effect in a pond, isn't it? So with the logosynthesis process, I mean, you just guided me through the process, but is it something that you have to have somebody facilitating and guiding you, or can you do it for yourself? How is that?
Yeah. Well, in the span of the 15 years where Logosynthesis developed, there's obviously literature to it. So Willem has written a few books. One is self-guide. So yes, absolutely. And having said that, there's a few other books out there which are simpler and easier to follow. And for everyday little things like anxieties and that, you can absolutely use Logosynthesis on yourself. And there's a point where things can be really difficult because we simply cannot see everything. It takes another pair of eyes and ears to be able to identify, and especially in a professional. And also when things get very deep, some of us have had traumatic experiences, that's when it's best to get, and I use the word traumatic very loosely these days, because trauma doesn't always have to be, be associated with abuse and all of that, but actually, as a child, little things can be, not getting an ice cream can be traumatic because you interpret, right? So, but those things hurt, and where there's a lot of pain, we tend to avoid it, and that's when, guidance with a professional, and there's a lot of practitioners out there, is not just useful, but necessary.
Necessary, yeah. So what I might do is, if you don't mind, we can maybe put together a little PDF or a list of 3 resources for reading for people on their own at home, and maybe where they can find facilitators of the process. Yeah, it's interesting because it's something we removed from Logosynthesis, but it just comes to mind now. I did a process which was called the birth surround process. So they take you back to your mother's womb, and this was something that I would never have imagined. That I was really had a trauma inside my mother's womb, that came up, and it was so evident because it really was navigating a way that my relationship with her especially, but so many other aspects of my life, so it is so true, trauma can be, and it can be, as we talked about before, it can be from generations passed down, it might skip a generation, but yeah, as you say, you can really go into those different layers and different aspects with the Logosynthesis.
Well, just last week we had an intervention practice group session. A colleague of mine had issues with dealing with, she said she wasn't able to connect with other people, and we traced it back to preconception, before she even made the decision to come into this world, if you believe that kind of thing. But that's how far back you can work with Logosynthesis, and it doesn't matter, because it's all where energy is bound or not bound. That's the simple basis of Logosynthesis.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty powerful process, I have to say. I'm impressed. Yeah. So, can you give us an example of maybe one of your clients that you've worked with? You've just given us an example here now of one of your colleagues who's a facilitator of the process. Maybe one of your clients.
Umpteen ones, but one that comes to mind, which we were talking about earlier on, was this lady who would like to be in a new relationship, but is she's trying things, Tinder and all these dating websites, and somehow it's not happening. And so we're looking at different aspects of her life. And when I asked her about relationships, what her previous experience has been, taking a holistic aspect, even though I'm a coach, and therefore I say clients, not patients. She said, well, she hasn't been in a relationship for 10 years, and the one before that, with her partner, he had cheated on her. And so, for me, it's like, well, that's a clear aspect, because that's potentially under an underlying fear of it happening again when you've been betrayed. Because when she spoke about it, it became very painful. And then there was one particular incident which came up, in the flash question, associated with this betrayal, where an image of her at Christmas with her family, etc. And then we worked on that. And it's going to be, there's a few layers to it, so it's not to say that one session will do it. But again, she had a similar situation, reaction like you did before. It's like, okay, there was an 8 in terms of distress.
The arousal of stress.
Exactly, thinking about that memory, and because she started crying and all of that. And tears are good in that sense.
It's also a release, isn't it?
Absolutely, they're information as well. There's stuff there. So we worked on that memory, and it became neutral. And so, she's a little further on, and we'll see next time what else is there. Because a lot of stuff around relationships, also in her case, is connected to our parents, how they related to each other, but also how they related to us, and
and how we received it,
Yeah.
and what we're trying to avoid, what we're trying to attract. It's all very core in those very early years of our lives, isn't it?
And we also have fantasies about relationships, expectations, and you use the word acceptance as well, right? So there's something about when we fantasize and have ideas around how relationships should be and how a partner should be, and it's not. It's kind of like this total disconnect between reality and our fantasy. And so we can also easily use Logosynthesis on fantasies and wishes and all of that. So it works for old stuff, but it also works for our fears and fantasies of the future. And wishes, our hopes and wishes are all, it's actually energy that's bound up there, instead of just taking things as they actually show up.
Okay, so would it be possible, for, let's say, somebody who's watching now that wanted to delve into Logosynthesis, could you do this virtually as well? So you could do it using Skype or Zoom or something like that?
I do a lot of that remote work.
Perfect. Well, so what we might do is we might, pass on people, your email address. If they have any more questions, about Logosynthesis, if it's resonated with them, please don't hesitate to write to Pam and just, ask her any questions that you feel, necessary, and I'm sure she's going to guide you in the right direction.
And there's a whole lot of practitioners out there, so we can always point you in the direction where people are.
Because I think
across the world.
Right, and I think it's another thing. I think it's so important when we do this work on ourselves, that we resonate with the person and that it feels good. So just get in contact with Pam if it feels good. I think go for it and have a treatment, because I was really very impressed, and otherwise she's going to point you in the right direction. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for asking
me
here.
I look forward to seeing you again soon.
It's been lovely seeing you.
Alright, so I wish you all the very best, and I look forward to seeing you soon.